At its core, professional wrestling is a cosmetic-first industry. How a wrestler chooses to present themselves is just as important as the moves they do between the ropes and the words they speak during a mandated promo. Some wrestlers have grasped that idea better than most, with Seth Rollins being a leading example. The majority of his attire choices have been remarkable and befitting of his character, with his chef's kiss of an all-white getup from SummerSlam 2015 remaining the brightest light of his wardrobe. Other wrestlers, however, ended up going in the opposite direction when they tried experimenting with their look. So join us now as Wrestlelamia looks at 10 WWE wrestlers who downgraded their attire. Be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for daily wrestling videos. Number 10. Becky Lynch. Although turning heel proved to be a premature misfire on WWE's part that would be quickly rectified, SummerSlam 2018 still marked an integral step on Becky Lynch's journey towards becoming the man as she snapped on Charlotte Flair. Why did she have to do it while looking as though her mascara had smudged? There was nothing inherently wrong with the outfit that Becky had fashioned for the match. She wore a silver dress that had pink detailing to match that of Charlotte Flair and Carmella, seemingly as a tribute to Natalya's recently deceased father Jim the Anvil Neidhart. But it was a choice in makeup that baffled viewers. A deep eyeshadow was painted across her face, forming an uneven line across the bridge of her nose that began to look muddy as the match progressed. Indeed, by the end of the 15-minute triple threat, Becky was left looking like she just watched Marley and Me. Like husband Seth Rollins, Becky Lynch has been known to adorn outfits that wouldn't look out of place on the runway of the Met Gala, but on this career-shaping night, it was a look that she thankfully never revisited. Number 9. Christian. Christian has undergone a small number of character transformations since his arrival during the Attitude Era, from his gothic days in the Brood, to his superhero bordering Captain Charisma persona, to his current position as a self-imposed father figure in AEW. His wardrobe hasn't really been upgraded as often as his gimmick has, considering he's worn his tights since 2003, and the only addition to his closet has been a collection of turtlenecks. But before he settled on wrestling bare-chested, the instant classic opted for a more peculiar look that thankfully didn't stand the test of time. In 2002, he ditched a brave look of tights and fishnet vests and began wearing a more traditional array of colourful singlets that truly weren't his style. The most appalling of the lot was a hideously fluorescent green number, but it says a lot that the most memorable thing Christian did while wearing these singlets was getting mauled by a Goldberg-inflicted spear. He left the singlets hung out to dry after less than a year of wearing them, and it was probably for the best. Number 8. Billy Kidman. Much like his other cohorts in the group, Billy Kidman went all in on the outcast aspect of Raven's flock in WCW, to the point that he based his character on a heroin addict. He had messy, unkempt hair, was dead behind the eyes, and would constantly scratch his body and face. He maintained this grungy aesthetic even after his association with Raven, as he grew out his hair to shoulder length and began wrestling in denim shorts and a string vest. However, upon signing with WWF in 2001, following its buyout of WCW, Billy Kidman was robbed of his most career-defining look, and thus his personality. Though his first appearance on WWF programming saw Kidman still dressed in his wife beater, he soon swapped the denim for a pair of biker shorts while having cut his hair to a more conventional length. He had absolutely no ounce of personality left by that point, and after being banned from unleashing his awe-inspiring shooting-style press after concussing Chavo Guerrero, it was no surprise when the curtain was closed on his WWE career. Number 7. The Big Show. The Big Show has been known to wear some choice ring attires throughout his career. Needless to say, his one-off stint in sumo apparel from WrestleMania 21 still sits at the top of the list of crap. But he has traditionally always worn some variation of a singlet. Much of the 2000s saw the world's largest athlete adorn a one-strap singlet similar to that of his kayfabe father, Andre the Giant. But the Big Show was blessed with a second strap at the 2009 Night of Champions pay-per-view. There he was unveiled as Chris Jericho's mystery partner in the wake of an ill-fated torn Achilles tendon suffered by Edge, meaning that Show became a unified tag team champion without having to lift a finger. He celebrated by debuting an odd purple and black number that did him absolutely no favors. Had it been an all-purple singlet, then it may have just crept past the sniff test, but the weird black accent that went up the side and around Show's crotch was wholly off-putting. It was a very unfortunate moment for both Paul White and the viewing public. All it did was perfectly outline the Big Show's, well, Big Show. Nobody needed to see that. Hadn't they already suffered enough at WrestleMania 21? Number 6. Chris Jericho. The master of reinvention Chris Jericho has had more gimmick changes than Roman Reigns has had WrestleMania events, but Y2J has seldom opted for an outright change of ring gear. He began his career wrestling in colourful tights, but an excellent heel turn in 2008 that saw Jericho re-elevated to the main event scene led him to turn his head towards more traditional trunks. Chris has been extremely open about this period in his career, having referred to it as the biggest risk of his career. Speaking during the post-show media scrum following AEW's Double or Nothing pay-per-view in 2022, he compared his move from tights to trunks to when Kiss removed their makeup. I will always go back to when Kiss took their makeup off. You know what I mean? You know that this was new Kiss because there's no makeup. That's insane. Why would they do this? Because it's different now, and for me, every time I change, there's always different clothes, a different look, different catchphrase, different entrance. I remember when I walked out in trunks in 2008 in WWE, and I wore nothing but long tights for 20 years. I was like, okay, I'm turning heel and I want to get rid of Y2J, get rid of the countdown and switch from long tights to trunks. I walked out and the first guy I saw was Bruce Pritchard. He said, "You've got great legs. Why have you been hiding them?" And I was like, oh great. I walked 3 feet down the hall, I seen Dean Malenko. He says, "You look ridiculous. Why would you wear those?" If I'd seen Dean first, I would have went back to the locker room and would have put my long pants back on. But because I saw Bruce, I was like, okay, this works. And nonetheless, the look was for a while one of WWE's most jarring. Chris Jericho remained a trunks wearer until his permanent departure from WWE in 2017, though he has brought them back on occasion, most notably during his time at the helm of the Learning Tree in AEW. Number 5. Mandy Rose. There was a lot to love about the wardrobe at SummerSlam 2020, from Sasha Banks paying homage to her and Bayley's epic war of attrition over the NXT Women's Championship from TakeOver Brooklyn by wearing the role model's black, white, and gold color scheme from that night, to Seth Rollins' mockery of the Mysterio family by wearing Rey's acclaimed black and purple colors from the '97 Halloween Havoc. Then there was whatever the hell Mandy Rose had come up with. Also boasting a black, white, and gold attire, which was noted as having become a staple of modern SummerSlam winners like The New Day and the aforementioned Seth Rollins, Rose wore her traditional gear from the waist down, including a fetching pair of gold knee pads, but everything above was just questionable. She wore an all-white singlet with a chest cut out to reveal a golden brassiere underneath, and also settled on a wet-look hairdo for the match that just looked unwashed. She defeated Sonya Deville that night to continue this particular color scheme's winning ways, but Mandy wasn't going to be winning any awards for Best Dressed. Luckily, in failing to set up a table, all the attention was taken away from her hideous outfit. Number 4. Taz. Taz enjoyed one of the best debuts in pro wrestling history when he jumped ship from the dying ECW to the thriving WWF at the 2000 Rumble. Introduced as Kurt Angle's open challenge opponent, the human suplex machine made shockingly light work of the Olympic gold medalist, choking him out within just 3 minutes to kickstart what should have been the makings of a monumental career at the top of the mountain. But that was as good as it got for him. By WrestleMania 3 months later, he was reduced to card-filling fodder as part of the Hardcore Battle Royal. When Taz arrived in WWF, he did so while still wearing his traditional wrestling singlet, and didn't decide to change his appearance until later that year, settling on, of all things, a boiler suit. The two-time ECW heavyweight champion has been open about the reasons behind his drastic change in appearance, noting on a previous podcast of his that he changed his look in an attempt to get noticed by Vince McMahon. More recently, Taz took to social media to explain why he didn't want the WWF to have the original version of him on his programming. "It was my idea. I've said this on my podcast years ago. I did not want my in-ring persona tarnished any more than they tarnished me. Therefore, I wanted to change my complete look before I retired from the ring. I didn't want them to have that ECW Taz look on their programming anymore." Number 3. Kane. Though his present-day political views ought to be on the losing end of an Inferno match, you can't deny how fundamentally important Kane was to the success of the Attitude Era. His eerie character remains one of the best examples of a supernatural being in industry history. The backstory between him and The Undertaker was as disturbing as it was captivating, and his Bad Blood 97 debut terrorized a generation of wrestling-obsessed children. He's had a runway of consistently great attires, but his time as the slacks-wearing corporate Kane raised more eyebrows than it did ratings. Ditching the mask for the second time in his career, the Big Red Machine became the director of operations, playing the stooge role in The Authority. It was far from benefiting of the man who once frightened children thanks to his voice box promos, seeing as he'd stopped wearing flames in favor of wrestling in funeral-like black trousers. According to Kane himself, during a recent appearance at River City Wrestling Con, he was never intended to wrestle under the corporate Kane guise, which perhaps explains his choice of attire, but he then compared his split personality to the Great Muta. The idea of Corporate Kane was that Corporate Kane was never supposed to wrestle, he was just a mouthpiece, and then when the Authority needed an enforcer, that's when Kane would put on the mask. But they were never supposed to touch the guy in the suit. The whole thing got completely lost, and it was almost like the Great Muta. We have two characters. Kane in the suit never would talk about the other Kane wearing the mask, and it just got lost. Number 2. The Undertaker. Much like fellow squared circle giant The Big Show, The Undertaker was known to experiment with his ring gear, though he largely stuck to what he knew already worked: hats, trench coats, bandanas, and leather trousers. However, at No Way Out in 2001, Taker appeared to have received a memo falsely declaring the pay-per-view as Wrestle in Your Pajamas Day. Booked for a 3-team tables match that pitted the Brothers of Destruction against the Dudleys and Edge and Christian, Taker wore what could only be described as a onesie that had been embroidered with the bright red Ministry of Darkness logo slapped bang in the middle. You gotta remember, this was still during the era of denim-wearing American badass, so why he thought it would be a good idea to swap back to the spandex for one night only is anyone's guess, particularly considering he was carrying a bit of extra lumber at the time that was more visible than if he had been wearing his trusty jeans. We'd be remiss not to bring up Taker's other ring attire snafu, as just 3 months earlier at the 2000 Survivor Series, he challenged Kurt Angle for the WWF Championship while wearing a pair of snakeskin trousers. A legend has it that Taker borrowed these from the Godfather after having forgotten his own gear, but he has denied these rumors, therefore insinuating that it was his own fashion choice. He lost, and thank goodness he did. And number 1. Rey Mysterio. Rey Mysterio is responsible for having wrestled in some of the most dazzling ring gear in pro wrestling history, with many of his attires paying tribute to the variety of superheroes such as Captain America, the Joker, and more recently Deadpool. They haven't all hit the spot. His body painted look in homage to the Silver Surfer stands out as particularly horrid cosplay, but the master of the 619 has usually managed to find the sweet spot for success. That was until he switched from wearing his iconic baggy trousers to wearing tight singlet-like attires. There was a good reason behind the sudden change in appearance. Wearing tighter ring gear allows for more flexibility and mobility in matches, which is crucial for a wrestler of Mysterio's style, but they were horrid to look at. The worst of the lot came on the March 12, 2019 episode of SmackDown, as for whatever reason, Rey had commissioned a flesh-colored outfit complete with what must be described as a black thong over the top. Why nobody pulled him aside and stopped him from wearing it on international television is anybody's guess, but thankfully the Hall of Famer just recently made the move back to wearing his more iconic look. But there you have it folks, 10 WWE wrestlers who downgraded their attire. Be sure to leave your comments down below, and I'll see you next time with some more wrestling content.